So people know about reincarnation, and on Earth it is taken as something not acceptable, not possible, not real for the people due to manipulation of established religions, in spite of ample evidence. The Catholic Church accepted reincarnation as far as the year 850 AC or so, as some people have documented, and only removed it, saying it was not so, when feudal workers were committing suicide in mass due to the terrible exploitation they were suffering in the hands of lords associated with the Catholic Church in Italy. Although this may be true, there is another deeper reason why the Catholic Church had to remove its accepting reincarnation as a fact. Reincarnation as such defeated many of the key concepts being imposed by the Catholic Church as part of their doctrine, such as a soul having to behave well and according to the rules throughout its life, to be able to be eligible for paradise or face damnation in purgatory and hell. This also meaning that it would weaken or defeat their concept of Jesus Christ sacrificing himself to save the people from the original sin. But there is evidence in the form of small children mostly that do remember their past lives, and in such a way that many can even be researched and corroborated. Being that the children do not have anywhere else where to get those concepts from, and also have the data or the knowledge to know details of other people and their lives as to be able to fake remembering. So the concept of reincarnation is quite understood by many people on Earth, as in one soul using a body and after death going into another for yet another experience, mostly with a lot of contrast between those lives, as in one having been a black woman activist against white people and then dying in a fire and reincarnating into a white boy. Real example. Then, humans also have some extra knowledge about reincarnation, coming mostly from the Far East, where it is accepted in Buddhism and Hinduism, among others. All with similar concepts such as samsara wheel and forceful reincarnation from astral entities, and all based on karma concepts. But here is where the understanding of reincarnation from a human perspective ends. Many non-human races of many branches, such as Lyrians, who are basically more humans, also called stellar humans, remember several past incarnations clearly and all their lives, not only the immediate past one, and in clear detail. So it became easier for them to study reincarnation patterns, such as a soul having a predisposition to reincarnate basically in the same family, and many times also following a pattern of souls reincarnating into a great-grandson or daughter. What other stellar races have come to understand about reincarnation is that souls tend to repeat old patterns, as in having attachments to being certain people they already have been. Another important concept here is that from the perspective of the afterlife, there is no time. So a soul will not reincarnate in a linear way, or not necessarily. So from the perspective of one particular soul reincarnating, it is possible to have a life in the 21st century and then reincarnate into another person in the Middle Ages, as it has been proven by several non-human races that everything is happening now. And everything is now also proven by starship navigation and temporal navigation and its practical uses. So, as the understanding goes, it is possible to repeat not only a life in a past epoch, but repeat the same life it already had experienced. And this is quite logical because of the large number of attachments people develop during a certain lifetime, and with them, the idea of having left many things undone. And as reincarnation is done by means of compatibility of frequency to a certain body and lifetime experiences associated with that particular body, then the mechanism becomes clear. So, as a description, a soul has a life, then reincarnates into another associated with the first life almost always, then into another third lifespan, yet another, and then it can reincarnate back into the first life it already had to experience it again, with any given number of lifespans in between, with no fixed number at all, or only associated with the tendency of one or another specific soul. The main driving force causing this is frequency match, a soul becoming a match to a former life it experiences once again. And this is caused by thought forms in the shape of attachment, as in unresolved issues of all kinds. What exactly defines a soul as such? Being that a soul is Source itself, considered a holographic fragment of Source, of the Absolute, of the Everything. Holographic, as in a smaller version of the whole, but that also keeps all the characteristics of the original. From my point of view, bigger and smaller have no meaning if not compared to something else, a reference point, and there is none here. So, if something has all the characteristics of another in equal form as it is the case here, then it can only be more of the same. So, Source is a soul, and the soul is Source. But the concept is that there are many souls and only one Source. For me, that is not so. For me, a soul is nothing other than a point of view of Source itself, an idea it holds in its mind, defined by a limit of any kind, and that limit is the concept in Source's mind. But what is that concept or idea. The span of memory any given soul has that defines it as one thing and not another, one soul in particular and not another, also giving birth to the concept of duality, one thing not being another. As a general term to understand my thought, I don't see multiverses. I don't see many places. I don't see densities. I only understand them as ideas and concepts others hold as reality, as the consequence of a set system of agreements that define a belief system. All I see is the whole, source, having a feast of ideas to entertain itself. I see one soul as the absolute, source itself, and there is only one soul, only having a temporal experience defined by its own ideas, and as the consequence of those ideas. Temporal experience as in one concept, coming after another, ideas again. And those base concepts are the ones that create another point of attention that we call a soul. So, as from the perception of any given soul, there are many. All it is seeing in reality are reflections of itself in other people, meaning that they are all aspects of itself, other points in its own timeline or sequence of events it has experienced previously from its point of view. Knowing that there is no time, only as the result of a direct experience of something having or holding an idea or concept. Therefore, time is the result of consciousness. So, other souls, other people, are nothing other than the same soul having a different point of view, idea. One soul, many ideas, reflected at the same time as other people, looking at its own reincarnations as other people, all happening at once. And the aspects of other people a soul rejects, as in the other people we don't like, are only reflections of ourselves, of what we don't like about ourselves, reflections of our shadows, things we have lived before, from our point of view, that reminds us of what we didn't like and we wish to forget or reject about ourselves, only to be hidden deep inside our subconscious. But many things we did like about other incarnations. That's why we also love other people, some more than others. And that also creates attachments to things we remember we left unresolved, be it consciously or not. If such an attachment is strong enough, then we might develop enough nostalgia to want to jump back into one or another lifetime we have in mind, and all due to our thoughts that also define our frequency, and frequency is everything, being that matching frequencies tend to be more of the same. That soul, with matching thought frequency, will therefore be compatible to be more of the same, meaning returning to that same specific incarnation, causing the soul's attachments and nostalgia. Mostly things left undone. So, souls do tend to be other people, then others, and then return to a specific past life. And then, if the pattern that caused the attachment and nostalgia is not resolved, it does have a clear tendency to repeat a set of lifetimes one after another, over and over, being the same people, one after another, coming back to the starting point. This is called a soul loop. So many people, any amount of them, are the very same soul, only differing from one another as other people by the current attention point the same soul is holding as the result of its own ideas, and framed by a given context of memory span each one is holding. Excellent. Wow, I understand. Now, is this soul looping something positive for the soul, or is it something we should try to avoid? It is not positive or negative. It is just part of how the entire system works. If it is positive or negative would only depend on the experience during the looping. Because if it gets obsessive, as it often does, then it can be negative. But the soul or person in the loop is the only one who can say if the experience is serving it or not. Because many do develop enough consciousness about the looping to realize it is not good, and it feels like in a trap and wants out, but doesn't know how. That's when it is not good for the person or soul. On the other hand, one incarnation or set of incarnations may be so satisfactory to the person's soul that it would like to repeat it, or them, to enjoy again, perhaps with variants and improvements. In that case, it is beneficial for a person's soul. And as a note, the feeling of being trapped on Earth, many people have, to try to return to Source when they know they are being like recycled over and over in the samsara wheel, as they call it. It is a soul loop. And as they are so programmed into thinking in a deterministic way, they blame others for their own doings. So they come up with archons and devils with pitchforks, forcing them again into the reincarnation cycle. Wow, cool, thanks. Now, this question. It would make sense to loop back right after having a life A, to repeat life A to correct something, since it's fresh in your mind. But why live life A, then B, and then C, to then loop back to A? That's what mostly happens back into life A. Example of this is what is described to happen to suicides, or Swaroos. From Swaruu 1 to Swaruu 9, they are basically the same people. From Swaruu 10 onward, no longer so, only the same body genetics, hence breaking the loop. But when a soul is fed up of life A, and then moves into life B, and then into life C, The soul thinks it is advancing, and in a way it is. But there are many reasons why a soul enters into this more extended trap. For example, what defines a life cycle is the experience in it. If everyone had the same experience, then there wouldn't ever be any different people. So the experiences of a series of lives, as in A to B to C, may be intertwined in cause and effect within the experience and life plot. As in A is the son or daughter of C. So the soul goes from A, then to B, and then to C, and then back to A. Maria gives birth to Gilbert. Then when Gilbert dies, he becomes Susan. And when Susan gives birth, it is a little girl named Maria. This would be a very closed circuit, oversimplified for Earth, more like what would happen in Taygeta. It is too immediate. Wow, they are all themselves? Yes, at a soul level. But this would be better explained if there were more people involved. People as in bodies. So from A to B to C to D to E to F and back to A. The cause of one in the former and the cause of that other one may be in the future. Another case of reverse time. Although in reality there is no time. So that's the exact mechanism how soul looping occurs. Because it is the frequency of the soul, its thoughts, who will determine where the soul will reincarnate next, and not a linear sequence in time as perceived on Earth. Incredible. I was just wondering about soul being its own daughter, son, as in the Gilbert Maria example, and Gilbert not being the product of parthenogenesis. But I think that's not related. Yes, I threw Gilbert in here because this is not a matter of parthenogenesis. It is a matter of souls jumping from one body experience to another because of their frequency of thought. Yes, okay, I think I understand. Example: Julia Ortiz from Nicaragua has no children. She dies at age 23. But for whatever mental reason, she wants to be a man next time. So she is then born into Nicholas Robinson from Detroit, Michigan. He lives happily with no children for 55 years until he gets hit by a bus. Then he feels that he did not do things right with Julia because she died too young. So he goes back into her, to be her, to do things right next time. Because from the afterlife level, you do remember past lives and what went wrong in them. But it tends to be very complicated. I am oversimplifying things here. An important note here. In order to understand me, what I say, have lived, and even many of the subjects I share, you must think with no time, as in all happening at once, and having only a temporal progression within a limited span of my examples, like for example those 55 years Nicholas lived, or the perception from that soul's point of view of one lifetime after another, in a sequence that involves time. This for this particular subject and all the others. Don't try to explain things using time as a constant or as a reference, because that's not going to fit ever. Talking about soul looping, I don't like the word soul because it conveys a loaded concept. But I only use it because I have few words I work with, so yes, it causes confusion. It is not even a thing, not something definable as with a boundary. I really dislike that term, soul. I have no words to describe what I think it is. More like a description I use over and over, point of attention of consciousness held together by attachments to ideas and defined by a length of memory. And not even, not enough. But I cannot say point of attention of consciousness held together by attachments to ideas and defined by a length of memory every time I'm referring to that, because people simply cannot understand, less with their overly short attention spans. And a soul is not an astral body either, because that to me is just another body, more ideas and attachments to them. Soul, removing all loaded concepts, is source. All of it. Everything that exists and ever existed and ever will exist all at once in a space beyond time and beyond distances. It is undefinable, unfathomable, but it does place, by effect of its own ideas, conceptual limits. And those limits that are only nearly arbitrary definitions is what would define one soul over another. Yes, for me it's not even a thing either, not something measurable or containable. I would say it is the source itself, looking through different ranges of perception of itself, what could be called a measurable from here to there experience, also identified to the portion of the source by its memories. Something like that? Yes, source has no duality, holds no duality. The instant duality happens, one thing and not another, then a soul is formed. Yes, without it, it wouldn't be able to call itself a soul, without those conceptual limits you mentioned above. Without those concepts it holds about itself, it cannot hold the concept Maria and the concept Nicholas. But Maria and Nicholas are only ideas, imagined avatars. Source is thinking into existence. Right, I understand. So the source jumps its attention from one point of attention within itself to another, based on those conceptual ideas and limits, and that will be called a soul reincarnating. But there isn't any specific entity like soul that literally hops from here to there. Soul as some kind of a ghostly looking sphere or whatever. It's just source's attention changing, right? Based on its own inner movies it creates. Yes, you are right. It is source only thinking its way, not a thing jumping bodies. It is like you writing a novel and liking a character so much, you use it in the next novel you are writing because you are attached to your own creation, the fictional character you liked a lot, because you want to give it more life, with another role in your next plot. And because you are so powerful and not limited to one character, and there is no time-space, you play thousands of those characters all at once, but they are all you. No one out there but you. It's so liberating and so damaging to one's sense of identity at once to realize this. I know, yes, and yes, exactly. And time is only valid during the reference frame of one character or another, being part of the concept and not something exterior. You are source. You are alone. That's why you make up fictional characters that only reflect yourself. Yes, precisely. Source is a tricky genius, though, for knowing how to impose that awareness of time, though, on all those characters. But as you always say, without the concept of time, there would be no characters. They need time to be called characters. Yes, because with no sequence, you don't have a character. But the sequence is limited to the perception of the character. Source also inbuilt into characters breaking out of the sequence of time. And then what? Killing off its own characters? In a way, yes. Because it no longer serves Source, because it likes a new one more. Like me saying, Swaruu 9 is obsolete. What if I bring a kid into the mix? I was just going to say that. Maybe that's another level of a character and another level of a game, like who you are. Next day. I have some questions, Yazhi. You said that the soul looping and all that, identities, it's all because we as Source operate from the level of ideas. But how did the Source get ideas? Souls exist because of ideas, but what spawned the ideas? At this super high level, we can only work theoretically. Thought has to have some form of temporal realization, or it would not be thought. I mean, the simple fact that consciousness exists has to generate time as a side product, for lack of a better word. If everything would be stopped, then there couldn't be any thought. But not as consciousness being a product of time. On the contrary, consciousness is sentient and aware of itself, and that is intertwined with time itself, almost as if it were another inseparable aspect of consciousness itself. What spawned ideas? The sheer fact that there is awareness. Ideas are another inescapable aspect of consciousness. But it is just about impossible to explain why. It is so great, so grandeur, that it is simply impossible to conceptualize at any level that is not Source itself. Yeah, a shame. I would love so much to untangle it from the very bottom. I know it's impossible, but the mind tries so hard to. This is exactly the point where the old Buddhist saying goes, an eye cannot see itself, a knife cannot cut itself. So we cannot understand Source and why ideas, thoughts spawned. Why consciousness is? Because that is exactly what we are. We are that eternal, unimaginable aspect of Source, so expanded, so unfathomable, that it is impossible to define, trying to understand its own existence. That is, for me, the reason thoughts were spawned. And a thought is a point of attention, something conceptualized as not source, being source as well, inescapably so, but playing not to be in order to understand itself, like a knife twisting so hard it hurts, trying to cut itself, a dog chasing its tail, an eye knowing there's nothing it can do to see itself and accepting its limitation within its unlimitlessness. These are the questions that we cannot answer. Everything we say is source, so everything is valid as source. Yet, it will never ever describe source as a whole. Playing not to be source in order to understand itself? How can the understanding come through not seeing itself, though? Or not being able to catch your own tail? It realizes that as an eye cannot see itself, then it is looking for something that is not an eye, not source, in order to see itself, even in a limited manner, like going to fetch a mirror. But all is source. It is source as well, so it is an illusion. The eye is not looking at itself. It is only deluding itself that it is. The reflection is only a reflection, not the eye. Similar, but never the same. But then, it created duality as an attempt to understand itself with the simple concept of me versus not me. But again, an illusion, because everything is you. Everything is source. How can source even exist, even be self-aware without duality? It could not even be conscious without duality. So duality is tied directly to consciousness, as time is as well, being that in the end, everything is still source. Duality and time regarded as separate things to consciousness, when they are inseparable, only being something else as a thought within consciousness itself. All right. We could go on and on here with the topic of source. It's fascinating. But going back to soul looping then, is this where deja vus come in too? Could they be explained by soul looping phenomenon? Yes, absolutely, but not only. A remembrance of having lived the same thing before, most probably having lived that before. Notice that deja vus stop commonly as a person ages and could be explained by many reasons. One of them may be because the person is now living new experiences, as in uncharted territory, but can also be explained with simple precognition. But it's not so simple, because precognition is tampering into the field, and you are then getting information outside of your timeline, again from past lives, accessing other lines and parallel universes, for lack of better words, without going too deep that way either. Yes, I understand. Okay, last question on soul looping for now. You said, for me, a soul is nothing other than a point of view of source itself, an idea it holds in its mind, defined by a limit of any kind, and that limit is the concept in source's mind. But what is that concept or idea? The span of memory any given soul has that defines it as one thing and not another. Okay, so would that mean that the more memory we carry, the bigger we are, and hence more expanded? But you always say that the memory doesn't matter to who we are. Like when I insist that I would like to remember my 5D life, etc. That's so and not. Again, a problem with multiple perspectives and wording. There, I meant memory as in direct memory of your present incarnation doesn't matter because you are supposed to work or exist within a limited range in 3D that defines Gosia as only Gosia from Poland, as in the set of earthy experiences that make up her frame of mental systems that make her function there as human. But as Source is not only a person, it is, but also much more. That is one level of your being. But looking at yourself from the next level up, all you know and all you've learned in all your previous incarnations is making you up today, is the very foundation of who you are as a Gosia from Poland playing human. You could never develop so much awareness in such a short time on Earth. Humans take that for granted, but it cannot be so. You don't acquire enough information to decode reality in a few years. Simply not possible. So, where do you get it from? You are carrying it with you as you go along, incarnation after incarnation. Look at the baby horse. It knows how to stand up and even walk just minutes after it was born. That is not inside the brain, as something born with as hardware. I see. So that is a memory you are talking about, yes? That innate inner knowingness? Yes. Okay, so it is that memory that defines us as souls, to be souls. We don't really go along our lifespan or along our previous lives learning things to expand our consciousness. We go remembering who we are and always have been. Because as there is no time, everything is already. We are only playing forget to be able to explain ourselves. But even as we remember, we still build our souls, no? As souls are being built. Or that's two different things here, different angles. From a higher perspective, it is only Source playing and making trick in order to try to comprehend itself, and as a simple byproduct of thinking, of being aware. So everything is already built. But again, perspectives. From a personal perspective, ground level, you are learning and you are expanding. It is just wording. From where are you looking at all this from? This brings constant confusion with what I say, because I change perspectives higher and lower all the time. But I am not saying one thing is so and not another. I'm only integrating all perspectives. If you say that the universe is a hamburger and time is the progression of that hamburger as it falls to the floor after the cosmic cat pulled it off the table, it sounds stupid from one point of view, but possible from another, and to be considered as well as valid cosmology. We may not understand yet how that can be so, but our not understanding how is that so now does not invalidate it, only makes us see our limitations. Yes, I get it. Okay, any final words on soul looping topic? It is an inescapable fact of the reincarnation cycle. Not a one-time exception or a rarity. It is part of the formation of consciousness as a soul to go experimenting not only infinite perspectives of itself reflected as incarnations, but also as variants with interesting results within those same incarnations. We all have wondered what would have happened if we would have made other choices. If you are attached enough to those other choices, as just about everyone is, then you do tend to repeat the same life over and over again. Or to combine the experience of having several different but connected lives as well, to experience a larger perspective of how they affect each other. Knowing from a higher point of view, from the afterlife, that the reason why you made a specific choice which you resent and would like to change resides in another lifetime. So you go there, live it again to change the reason, so it ends up affecting the one you want, and be able to take that other choice that is the one you really want to experience as a variant. And it gets bigger and bigger with the same dynamic. More lifespans, bigger loops, from more expanded points of attention. I'm just laughing at all this wackiness of soul and creativity and resourcefulness and playfulness. There are no limits to what a soul or source can do. All it has to do is think it with enough enthusiasm.